the whole artificial intelligence topic. There's been so much speculation about this, how it will roll out, how it will be used. And today we get a chance to talk about how that might be important in higher education generally, and then at Fielding as well. AI, artificial intelligence.
Artificial intelligence, in my mind, is a phrase, it's a catchphrase for a large category of things. So the way I think about it is there's two elements in artificial intelligence, or two big buckets, if you will. So the first bucket is the tracking of humans through a system, right? That's the whole data tracking, and that raises all kinds of issues around ethics and privacy and so on. Mm-hmm. In higher ed, where that's manifesting is in these large-scale systems where student behavior is tracked, and it can be used in very positive ways. So for example, there are big learning management systems for online courses that the algorithm can show that, the students aren't showing up, and then it automatically sends a message to the faculty saying your student hasn't opened their homework assignment yet, and then the faculty is reminded to contact the student. Okay, that's a use of a kind of artificial intelligence. And that's just a tiny example of this whole container, this whole element of data, use of data to track behavior that then interventions result. Mm-hmm. That's happening in higher ed at scale. Fielding is not meant to be at scale ever. How many people get doctoral degrees, for example, or advanced degrees in general in the United States and in the world? Our job is a much more individualized kind of and personalized kind of program. So we are not using those forms. However, it doesn't mean that we don't have a role to play in talking about or considering things like the ethical considerations of data use, privacy, the ways in which AI can be used in ways that are not conducive to human behavior, right? So there's all that, there's a shadow side to that. This particular element and container I think is important, but I bracket it a little because I see that happening in higher ed, but not so much overlap at Fielding. The second element in consideration is this knowledge creation enterprise. And in my mind, that's both higher ed and specific to Fielding. So this is the container that I think Fielding lives in. Really, the promise of graduate education is knowledge creation. It's new ideas, new scholarship, new research, new theoretical questions. It is about pushing society along incrementally but inexorably towards a greater understanding. And in our case, it's a greater understanding of society, right? Social sciences, greater understanding of psychology. All of these we're trying to do slowly and surely. That our ancestors started Fielding, we're going to carry it to our descendants. And the idea is, what is our role between, here and there? So when we get to artificial intelligence, this is where things get exciting. So in higher ed, big conversations, of course, about ChatGPT, right? Which you've heard of, which is yet another one of these engines, I guess I'll call it. I'm not an IT person, but an engine in where you can do this. Maybe you've done it. You type in your name and say, write a 600-word essay by Anita Perez Ferguson on young adult fiction, and something comes out. Well, you may have done that. It takes less than, it might as well be less than a light year. I mean, it takes no time at all. And you read it, and it may surprise you, right? So you read it, and at first you think, wow, that's pretty good. Then you read it again, and there's two things that you'll notice. The first is that these engines can't tell the difference between fact and fiction. So they're simply aggregators, and they're taking everything known up to a certain point, and they're aggregating that intelligence. So what happens is, quite quickly you'll see they're the same words used over and over, same frames and so on. And because they can't distinguish between fact and fiction, why should they? Why should it, I guess we should say. It simply is this thing. It's sort of this lifeless essay. The second thing you might notice is that there's no human story. Like there's no additive value. So yes, It took your words or my words and it used them in a frame that sounds a little like me or you, but ultimately it really lacks that kind of human underneath. Now, the response is, well, they're just going to get smarter because every time one of us does this, we're making us smarter. But I think the bigger point for knowledge creation is that ultimately there's still something that humans have that these aggregators don't have. And there's something, and I would say there's a really distinctive something for graduate educators, because that is the promise, that is what graduate educators bring to society more wholly, is that we create new knowledge. So we are all about asking new questions, doing new research, doing new scholarship, also engendering new kinds of theoretical questions. And our job is incrementally to build knowledge over time for society, to deepen our understanding, not only to live into more fully what it means to be a human being, but also to advance our societies. And that is just, to me, that is ultimately what graduate education does, that no other part of society does. No other sector really does to the extent that we do. So when you start thinking about artificial intelligence, you start thinking about that knowledge creation piece. And I think there are three things that fielding does. Other educators do it as well, but I think it is unique to graduate education. It's something we need to think more deeply, and our faculty are already focused on these larger questions as it pertains to AI. Three things that we do that is really needed for the continued, I don't know if I want to say interface, because that's more of a computer word, but the interaction between human beings and AI, and that is critical thinking, analytical judgment, and discernment. So we need to teach our students that when they get something from ChatGPT or one of these other aggregators or new things that haven't even been invented yet, how do they know? How do they know? Well, probably since you were a freshman in college, you took classes or faculty would talk about critical thinking. But what does critical thinking really mean for the ways in which we use AI or don't use AI? And frankly, we've been rather unconscious about it as a society. But what graduate educators can do is continue to wake us up and continue to say, this is what critical thinking looks like. This is what discernment is. This is how you know if something on a page is authentic, is a fact, is data-based, and when it isn't, and when it's not written by a human and when it is. Now, that sounds fairly aspiring, but I think we're going to get better at it because human beings are adaptive. And I think the louder that graduate educators can raise their voices, the better. So I'm pleased to see already, as early as we started to use the word AI, we have faculty, particularly intermediate psychology and clinical psychology programs, but also in our organization development programs, who are asking these bigger questions. So yes, they're asking some in the first container I talked about, data, privacy, et cetera, ethics. But they're also in the second container saying, what does this mean for knowledge creation? What does this mean for how we work with our students? What kinds of questions should emerge? What kinds of dissertations should we be writing? That's the essential work of graduate education. In my mind, that's because fielding is this innovative place. That's the work we can do best.
Excellent. To me, fielding really taught me how to ask good questions.
Exactly.
And it fits right in with what you're saying, and that's where we are today. You need to ask the questions correctly. All right. Let's go on to AI. One more question about it, because when we attach it to adult learning models at fielding, that's kind of where the rubber hits the road. So how do you see that direct connection, adult learning models?
Yeah, this is interesting because we focus on adult learners, and our model is very much predicated on the idea, and adult learning has a set of has a theory behind it around the responsibility of an adult learner and also the kinds of experiences that they bring to their learning environment. And it's this push-pull between what a person brings in and the autonomy that they have and the voice that they want to have in the creation of their learning plan. That's one piece, but the other piece is also the discipline, what the discipline requires, that is the field of study requires, in order so that these two mesh together to create the kind of professional, both career and personal development that an adult learner needs and wants to aspire to in their graduate degrees. So that's basically what adult learning is. It's not simply the age of a person, right? It's bigger than that. But then when you think about, okay, what's the AI piece to adult learning? What I think about is that our students of today have not only different expectations than when we started 50 years ago, but they also have different levels of experience with social technologies, for example. And so I think that they're starting to ask these deeper questions about how social technologies has been driving societal conditions. And you can see that starting to emerge in our dissertations and starting to emerge with the kind of questions that students are asking in their early courses. So as a graduate, you know that you took courses in theory in the beginning. And I'm noticing students asking more of those deeper questions. And so I think adult learners are distinctly suited to the questions that AI generates for us as human beings.
To be continued. Huh?
Yes, more on that later as it develops.
Well, let's start to put a wrap on this. There's so much and so many wonderful things to look forward to. So I couldn't finish this until I ask you this question. In your magic eyesight, I want you to look ahead to fielding. What do you think will be the defining feature of our university that drives our future?
It will be our students, our dissertations, and our graduates, honestly. So it would be the students and the alum and the body of work that they create that has an impact in the world and makes a positive social difference in the world, whatever their sphere is. That's all that we have, and that's everything.
That is everything. Glad to be with you today. Thank you.
Anita, what a pleasure. Good to see you again.
Likewise.